everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Hi, everybody. My name is Loren Hauck. Thank you for joining us tonight. Greetings. Thank you for spending the time with us tonight. Chrysalis Way, as panelists and sponsors, are very excited to bring these online symposiums to you. We want them to be, very interactive. You can put your questions in chat if you have a burning desire when people are talking, or you can put your questions in Q&A, and then we can answer those questions at the end. So welcome to Chrysalis Way's online Sexual and Love Addiction and Trauma Symposium number 2 on true intimacy. We are very excited to have Chrysalis Way clinicians here tonight. Chrysalis Way is a brand new national online sexual addiction and love addiction IOP with top clinicians from multiple states. We also have our sponsors joining us tonight, Ken Seeley from Mental Wellness by Ken Seeley out in Palm Springs, and representing his new mental health and OCD residential treatment programs in Palm Springs, California. Tiffany Ann Schutz won't be able to join us tonight, but she is founder and president of Sage Recovery Villa, luxury holistic full wellness rehab, specializing in working professionals and licensed healthcare professionals that's located in the Austin, Texas area. And then we're going to have Miss Caroline Smith, Director of Addiction Services and Intensive Workshops at Pine Grove in Mississippi. 2 CEs will be given to all attendees tonight of our event, thanks to Sage Recovery Villa. Please note that our social work CE license renewal is pending due to COVID delays, but the new app and it was turned in the spring, but it's just taken a while to get that going. These CEs should transfer to most therapist boards in most states. We asked you to please check with your boards, however, just to be sure. But we've been doing these for quite a while, and there hasn't been an issue with most therapists having those CE credits transfer. After the online symposium tomorrow morning, Shana and I will send you an evaluation link for you to fill out. Please fill it out, and it should automatically send you a CE certificate. I'll probably just attach the CE certificate just in case, so you can have that, and we'll also send a recording of the event and some other information for you. And then also we have Carolyn Smith from Pine Grove. She will be giving away a free intensive workshop certificate tonight for a intensive workshop at Pine Grove, which is really exciting. And we'll just do like a trivia question at the end, and whoever first responds correctly, they will get that free workshop certificate. Additionally, all attendees will receive a $50 discount to Ken Seeley's CCMI certified case management and intervention trainings. We have our next training is starting this Friday, September 18th to the 20th. Any therapist can attend one training for the minimum 20 CEs, just to get the education, the CE credits. These are all pre-approved for Medco, social work boards, APA, so those will for sure transfer. So any therapist can attend the training this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, for minimum 20 CEs, or you can continue and do all 5 of the training mods, and you can become a certified case manager and interventionist through Intervention 911, Ken Seeley and Eric McLaughlin. It's a great way for therapists to expand on their services, and these intervention case management trainings are incredible. They not just focus on intervention techniques for substance use disorder, but also for sex and love addiction, other cross addictions like eating disorders, and also primary mental health. I did all these trainings in 2019. They're truly life-changing personally and professionally. Great networking opportunity. So got that. Some pre-approved CEs from coast to coast for therapists. Also, to get started tonight, this is very exciting for me. I've got a long journey in sex and love addiction, and has been my journey, over many years, and started working in this industry over 16 years ago. And so, working with Chrysalis Way, which is, a new age online IOP for sex and love addiction, is I'm truly passionate about being a part of that. So just to get started, just a bit about my personal journey. I am a recovered sex and love addict with over 4 years in recovery. It has taken a while to start dating again after I went to treatment in 2016. I think something big that I've been missing for many, many years with my partners was, the ability to have true intimacy. And I had not had healthy attachments with any partners, honestly. Gosh, I'm 41 now, up until my fiance now. And now for the first time in my life at age 41, like I said, I'm exploring true intimacy with my partner, and it's truly, truly different. So obviously, it has been a long journey to get there. But definitely thankful for the journey and to be able to talk about it openly and, maybe help somebody that's struggling. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you, Shana. Shana Rubelow is our in program development at Chrysalis Way, and I'm going to hand it to you and to introduce the other staff at Chrysalis Way.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. It is my pleasure to introduce the wonderful panelists that we have here. Unfortunately, Faith Niece was unable to make it. Something came up last minute, but I have no doubt that the people that we have on the panelists will be able to answer all of your questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this will go. So I'll just go around, I'll introduce you to everyone, and then we can start with some questions and get down to what is healthy sexuality. So we'll go ahead. Carol Clark, Dr. Carol Clark, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I'm Dr. Carol Clark. I have a doctorate in human sexuality. I'm a sex therapist, a certified addictions professional. I run my own schools, so I'm training other therapists in sex therapy and addictions therapy. So the International Institute of Clinical Sexology is one of my schools, my PhD program. I'm also the author of a couple of books. One is Addict America, The Lost Connection. It's really about lost connection. The other is My Pocket Therapist. So that's supposed to be me on the cover. My Pocket Therapist, 12 Tools for Living in Connection. And those are really just both really useful for people in recovery and looking to have better connections in their lives. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. And now Dr. Daniel Water, do you want to say a little bit about who you are and what you do? We would love that.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. I'm also really happy to be here to have this discussion with everyone this evening. So my name is Dan Water. I'm a clinical psychologist and a certified sex therapist in a group private practice here in New Jersey. And I have been practicing sex therapy for somewhere between 35 and 40 years. I've lost count, but it's past 35 and just short of 40. My introduction, I guess, to sex and love addiction kinds of problems came about when I was a doctoral student at NYU in the early 80s. Maybe it was the late 70s, but I believe it was the early 80s when this happened. And one of my professors was the book review editor for the Journal of Sex Education and Therapy. And they received a new book that nobody wanted to review. So he figured since he had such power over his doctoral students, he would give it to one of us. And so I was given a book that was called The Sex Addict. That book has been renamed. It was renamed a few years later to a name that's probably a lot more familiar to all of you, Out of the Shadows. This was Patrick Carnes's first book. And when I first reviewed this in the early 80s, Nobody knew who he was. Nobody had any idea of how this approach worked, theoretically or practically. So I actually still have the review of the book. I gave the book a very positive review. I thought that Carnes was innovative. I thought that he was thoughtful. I thought that he was brilliant, and I thought that he was a real pioneer. And I still think all of those things. My personal approach to treatment has veered away from that particular model, but it certainly influenced my growth in my early years as a sex therapist. So that's kind of how I began with all of this, and that has just continued now for the past 35 plus years.
Thank you, Dr. Waters. That was very clear. Robert, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here this evening. My name is Robert Johnson, and I'm a certified sex therapist, certified trauma therapist, and I've been in the field close to 30 years. And like Dr. Waters, I also got my start with Patrick Carnes' Out of the Shadow book, because I worked back in Tucson, Arizona at Sierra Tucson, and I worked with the sexual recovery track. So working with sex addiction, trauma, sexual trauma, and overall sexual concerns, paved the way for me to continue that work throughout my career up until now. And I'm happy to be working with Hope Street, being one of the therapists as we continue to explore this area. I was looking at some of the questions, and I'm really happy to be part of talking about healthy sexuality, because that is a subject that I think still in our culture that a lot of people do not want to discuss or talk about. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And Dr. Ariella, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, but please feel free to correct me.
It's okay. So my name is Ariella. I'm an attending psychiatrist. I'm on faculty at Columbia University in the Department of Psychiatry, Ethics, and the Law. And I also work for the New York State Department of Health, where I oversee the arousal management division of the sex offender treatment program. And I'm a psychiatrist in private practice. In my private practice, I do a significant amount of sex work. So I guess between those two extremes, I deal with the healthiest ways of thinking about sex and the most unhealthy ways of thinking about sex. And I'm glad and thankful to be here today.
Thank you so much. So that's those are our panelists. We also will be having Carolyn Smith. She'll be joining us a little bit later on. And then we'll have her step in and introduce herself then. But I wanted to open the floor. I guess I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. My name is Shana, and this came about in a way that just felt like we needed to fill this void. I did a webinar with Ellie Nash. The topic was exit strategy on porn addiction. And I remember the night before, we thought there would be 20 or 30 people that would show up, and there was a couple of hundred people that showed up. And afterwards, we just had a lot of people reaching out saying, I think I'm an addict, I need help, where do I go? And we didn't know where to send them. We looked into sex addiction therapists, and what I realized is the people that are really good don't have the time to take on 10 new clients. And that was when I said, we need to figure out a way to help these people. So I kind of got involved just because I'm passionate. My goal is everyone deserves a chance, and we need to help people get there. So I reached out to Faith Nice, and I asked her if she would be willing to start a program, and she was the one that said, absolutely, let's do it. So with her and Mendy Barron, who already had a couple of other rehab facilities, so everything was set up. It wasn't like starting from scratch. We were able to set up a sex addiction program. And part of that, our goal is let's help as many people as can be, because we all know that feeling of just feeling like there's no hope. And I'll always say, where a person could live for 30 days without food, 7 days without water, 3 days without sleep, 4 minutes without oxygen, but you can't live a single second without hope. And that's what we're trying to bring. We're trying to just bring hope. So that's really one of the reasons that I wanted to do this webinar, is to be able to just open up the floor, let people see that this topic is not as scary as it feels, give a couple of answers here or there, and just help people feel that they have a platform to ask their questions and to be able to get the answers from knowledgeable clinicians. So that's really the main reason why I decided to do this. I'm really excited. Loren Hauck really pulled it together, so I'm really grateful for that. And I think the best way to start this would be with a question that I have is, why do you think we have a hard time discussing sex as a culture? And I'll open the floor. Whoever is up to jumping in, please feel free. And I'd love to get some answers on that.
Somebody mentioned shame in the chat. Just want to say that.
I can start. First, I love the dog.
Oh, thank you.
I'd say it has to do with two things. One, the external factors and how we as a culture think about sex, and two is the internal factors, how we as humans feel about our own sexuality and all the insecurities that come around that. So there are all the obvious reasons for why it's shameful and difficult to talk about sex, having to do with religion and conservatism and ideas that are passed on from generation to generation about sexuality. But in addition to that, there's the big issue of the insecurity that people feel about their sexuality, the insecurity that people feel about how their sexuality compares to others, how active their sex life is compared to others, or what it should be. And this discrepancy that compounded by the fact that a lot of people don't talk about it kind of fosters more uncertainty and makes the topic even scarier than it actually is. And it's like one of those things where the more you don't talk about it, the bigger of a deal it becomes, and then the harder it is to have conversations when you've abstained from having these conversations for 10 or 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, I would also, I would agree with that, and I would add that, for a lot of us, being sexual is when we're the most vulnerable, and so there's some fear associated with that about, sort of opening ourselves up in that way. But I also think that on a more societal level, because you did ask, Shana, about why is it hard in this culture, is, if you think about the introduction that so many of us had to sex, it's one that's really laced with fear and danger, right? I mean, if you had any education in school, and back in the day when I was in school, it consisted exclusively about sexual diseases, venereal diseases, sexually transmitted diseases. So right off the bat, you were taught about all the dangers about catching diseases, about getting pregnant, on and on. And as we've seen, that anytime someone presents with a sexual pattern or sexual behavior or sexual interest that doesn't seem to be the standard of the day, it's pathologized. This was the case for homosexuality in the early DSMs. That was considered a mental illness. So many paraphilias that we no longer consider to be diagnosable illnesses today were at one time considered illnesses. And as someone who not only works with people with sexual dysfunction and other sexual and relational problems, I also do a fair amount of work with sex offenders. And it never ceases to amaze me how harsh we are with sex offenders after they've completed treatment and their prison terms. They will be, Megan's Law is really all about the fear of sex. It should be about the fear of violent offenders, but you can be a sex offender who was never violent, and yet you will be followed for the rest of your life. However, if you commit murder, you do your time and you are free to to live your life. So I think that culturally, we've surrounded a lot of sex with fear and illness and pathology. And I think it's been very hard to get out from under that.
I agree with that.
Oh.
Wait, I talk.
Oh,
Please.
thank you. Okay. So I look at shame is linked intricately with guilt. And guilt is about the word should. I know, Dr. Allen, you said that. There's these shoulds that come to us from our culture, from our religion, from our parents, from a variety of external places. And where there's a should, it makes things black and white, all or nothing, concrete, right or wrong. And at the bottom of the should, who says? Who says? We all have free will. We have the ability to think things through for ourselves. So, but what we do is we hear these shoulds, they get drilled into us, all around us from childhood. And we go through our lives living by them and then experiencing guilt or resentment and shame when we don't do something we think we should, that we've been told we should, or when we do something that we think we shouldn't have. So there's plenty of shoulds around sex, plenty of sexual messages that we got both verbally and non-verbally from the moment we're born. And as we grow up and then start trying to navigate our sexual lives, all those shoulds, a lot of them unconscious, are just influencing us. And so we feel guilt, we feel shame, without even knowing where it comes from. But it's an easy thing to do is when you're feeling guilt, shame, resentment, say, okay, where's the should here? What am I saying should about? I shouldn't have sex with multiple partners. Well, who says? So change the should to want or would like or wish if you're talking about the past. I would like to have sex with multiple partners. Okay, is that true? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe yes and no, because unlike the black and white should, all or nothing should, want or would like leaves a lot of options, and then we can choose which one do we want, and we can make a personal decision that we can own. And when we do that, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no resentment. We had a question about the should down there, but go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
Well, I agree with all my fellow panelists on what they have said. And you have to remember, as a society, how did we learn about sex? From our parents, and who learn from their parents, or they don't talk to us about it at all. Dr. Waters had mentioned, that in school, they taught about, diseases, the fear about reproduction, but they don't talk about the values and the morals of one's family. So if you raised in a place of shame, not being able to talk about sexuality, we're going to continue to perpetuate that, as we get older. Right now we're having a free and open discussion about sexuality, which a lot of us didn't have growing up, or until we got into a healthy place to be able to discuss it. So I think the society, we still have a far way to go in being able to talk comfortably about sex and sexuality. And I like what Dr. Clark just said about getting rid of the shoulds in our life, because I think that will continue to feel the shame and guilt we have when it comes to sex.
I'd like to answer that question, if I may. Somebody, Sora, was talking about our children instilling should in our children, leaving us with little morals. If you say to your child, I would like you to, then you can follow that up with your rationale. So I would like you to do this, behave this way, think about this. And you can start from a very young age teaching your children to start thinking for themselves, and giving them the freedom to disagree with you as they grow up. So, there's one thing with don't put your finger in the socket, which they're going to do anyway. But when you say, so you shouldn't put your finger in the socket, and I say, well, I want to, and I'm going to, and then they're going to learn. But when it comes to the morals, give your rationale. What is your thoughts? Be able to start teaching your children how to dialogue, how to think for themselves, how to have conversations, and give them that space to think for themselves. And you know, whatever it is you want to pass on to them, you will still pass that on.
I agree. The other thing I want to add is as you teach your children about, on that balance we talk about, teaching them about the difference between secrecy and privacy, what you do on your private time, so you don't feel shame, but if it's turned into a secret, like when a stranger touch you or someone talking inappropriately and you don't say anything, that feels shame because that's a secret. So you also teach your children about the difference between privacy and secrecy, that also would, help with your values and morals.
Thank you. That was very clear. There's so much on that topic. And I know I said the word culture, but I guess I was just saying it wasn't necessarily in a specific culture. It was more in general, how, I guess, as a human, how humans view it. So I apologize if anyone took offense to that. That was, it was just, how do we view it? Another thing that I wanted to bring up is the topic that we're trying to shine some light on is healthy sexuality. And I wanted to explore that a little bit, is how do people learn what is healthy and what does healthy mean? And I feel like that's a really great question, because before we start exploring what's going wrong, can we first see what healthy looks like? So if anyone would like to start.
Sure, I'll start with that one. So, I know this may sound a little bit like splitting hairs, but I have to admit I'm not a big fan of the phrase healthy sexuality. I think we're probably all on the same page in terms of where we want to go with this. But to me, trying to decide what's healthy versus unhealthy for any individual is very problematic and I think judgmental. However, I think where we're probably going with this is when I think about the term healthy sexuality, I think about a sexuality that is consensual, that is enjoyable and fulfilling, and that is legal. And sort of, beyond those three or four items, I think it's important to be accepting of sexuality in all of its varieties. Unhealthy sexuality to me is more problematic sexuality to that person, to that couple, to that relationship, or to the society in general that they live in terms of the laws, not in terms of what we think is supposed to be appropriate behavior. I mean, there are, especially these days, we are seeing our conceptualizations of what sexual identity is about, what sexual orientation is about, what sexual behavior is about. It's changing all the time. It's much more fluid now than we used to be, much more rigid about it. So to me, a healthy sexuality is one that, as I said, is consensual, it's enjoyable, and it's legal.
I'll jump in.
Thank you,
So,
Becca.
I frame everything, this is the result of like all my years of being a therapist, being a person, being a child of an alcoholic, and on and on. That's what led to the Addict America, the Lost Connection, was I look at everything as addiction. We're either in addiction or in recovery. So I look at addiction as a state in and of itself, and then specifiers would be drugs of choice. So, if we think about healthy sexuality, it would, for me, that would be living in recovery and any kind of sexuality that's done from a recovering place. And like Dr. Water is saying, what is certainly legal, what is consensual. When we think about addiction and recovery, addiction is about disconnection. It's about not being aware of who you're with, objectifying partners, just thinking, I want what I want when I want it. Getting high, escaping from pain, just running into the next thing without thinking about where you are in the moment. And that would be what I would define as unhealthy. So recovering sexuality would be being really present with whoever you're with, whether it's a long-term partner or just someone that you choose to be with in the moment, but being present with that person, knowing that this is who I'm with, this is what we're doing together. And I'm present, I'm grounded, I am just in my body, I'm not escaping anything. I'm doing what I want to do, what I choose to do with who I choose to do it with. So it's all about the energy we bring into it. And this is where I know a lot of people get, hung up on the idea of, with alcohol or drugs, there's abstinence, but we know there's a difference between abstinence and recovery. But when it comes to sex, we get a lot of pushback against even the idea of sex addiction because people are talking about, sexual behaviors. But so if we look at what's the energy we bring into it, we can do a lot of different behaviors with an addictive energy, or we can be doing it with recovering energy. And that's what I help people look at.
And I'm going to jump in a little bit. So I agree with everything that's been said. The one thing so I didn't mention earlier that I'm an addiction psychiatrist by training, and I do see a lot of similarities along the lines of what you were saying between the way people treat and utilize drugs and alcohol in their lives and the way people utilize sex in their lives. One approach that I've been taking is kind of talking about sex in the same way that I talk about drugs with my patients. Basically, drugs are supposed to give you some. People don't take drugs because they're trying to be depressed, or people take drugs because they're trying to have a good time. And then at some point when people cross from not healthy, but recreational to pathological and disordered use of drugs, the drugs stop being fun, and then they start being associated with mood issues, depression, covering up for other issues, and kind of playing catch up where you're using one thing to cover the effects of another. And people end up in these vicious cycles. And the same thing happens with sex. The first thing I'll say is the difference between healthy and unhealthy sex is, are you still getting the same kind of pleasure, whether it's intimacy, connecting with the other person, or like exploring your own body? That's the first thing. And the other thing is thinking about why you're engaging in that sexual act. What is the purpose? Is the purpose to actually experience something new, something pleasurable, or to just engage in a routine behavior, in behaviors of habits? And then the third thing is, what would happen if I didn't have sex today? Would I be upset? Would I be frustrated? Would I feel crappy? If that's the case, then the more important question is not whether sex is healthy or unhealthy, but what is the underlying issue that you're trying to cover or mask using your sexuality?
Thank you for explaining that. I'm learning how little I know about sex addiction, so this is really enlightening for me to realize how much there is and how deep it is and how far down it goes. I see a bunch of questions coming in about children and when to bring that up and how to bring that up. I don't know if any of you want to jump in if this is something that comes up constantly. But I feel like if we can address that, that would be interesting to see what your take would be on that and how to keep the kids as safe as possible. Or is this not a good question for this group of people?
I'm sorry. I was actually writing down everybody's names. You lose focus for one instant and you miss the whole thing. So say that again, since nobody else jumped in. Ask the question again, please.
Really, the question was, I guess, how early do you start talking to children about sex and sexuality? So,
go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, to me, as early as possible, just like you start teaching your children how to walk, how to count the ABCs. You start talking to them about all their body parts. Like what their fingers are for. When you start potty training them. That, because all that is part of sex and sexuality. Letting them be comfortable with their bodies as they grow up. So each stage of development for a child, and I'm not a child therapist, but I have worked with children, but it's about being able to speak to them about, what their body part, their penis and vagina, versus saying, things like they thing or wee-wee. It's really about starting to have them be comfortable in talking about things and being able to come to you as a parent to talk about, what's going on with their bodies as they get older year by year. I mean, I know my psychiatrist panelists probably would say, have more to say about that in development, but that's where I say start talking to kids as soon as possible.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Johnson. I think he's absolutely right that we want to start these dialogues as early as possible, and in the way that he described, which is kind of a matter-of-fact discussion, that talking about the sexual parts of the body and sexual behavior is much like talking about anything else, and to not make kids feel like this is a topic that's shameful or that they shouldn't bring up to their parents or would be embarrassing. I think, though, the one thing that we do have to be mindful of, however, is that I always think I've been trained in biomedical ethics as well as therapy, and I always think about a phrase in medical ethics called the unintended consequences. And the reason I'm saying, and I agree with what Mr. Johnson was saying about the way to talk about it, is because a lot of times we are well-intentioned with our kids, but we scare the life out of them. We make them afraid of the world. I don't know how many of you may remember, but several years ago, when we were concerned about missing children, and we put children's pictures on milk cartons, which certainly sounded like a good idea, but it terrified kids, and so I think, we need to be careful about not presenting this in a way where, we have kids think that, everybody out there, is a potential predator. And so it's a fine line, it really is, because we do want to protect our kids, of course. But I think the more we can have these discussions and have them feel natural, the more likely it is that if anything is going on with our kids that's unusual, they will be able to bring it up to us.
Absolutely. The only thing I'll add to this conversation is, first of all, yes, as soon as we can have conversations with our kids, it's important to talk about sex, because sex is something that's going to come up. And I always remind parents that if you don't talk to your children about sex, someone else will. So at least it's important to control the narrative. But as part of that conversation, the most important thing is relevance. If we're having a conversation to children about sex, to minors about sex, telling them just about the risks associated with sex is not going to be relevant. It's going to serve the purpose of further alienating them. As important as it is to kind of discuss with them the importance of safe and healthy sex and avoiding STDs and avoiding illegal behaviors, it's important to talk about sex being good things and how to maintain and to kind of create a space at home that is safe enough to discuss these important issues, because most probably the kids are not going to bring up what's going on in that moment, but what they're going to get out of that conversation is that my mom or my dad is cool enough for me to ask them a question when it comes up. And these issues do come up. So it's better for the parents to control the narrative rather than kind of have their kids rely on someone else, share with them incorrect information, or even more dangerous, rely on the internet to get some misinformation.
Yeah, so these are conversations. It's not like having the sex talk. It's talking with your children opportunistically from the very beginning, as soon as you can talk, and making a safe place. Parents often aren't aware of how unsafe they make it for their kids to talk to them. And also a really big problem for a lot of parents is they ruin their children's intuition in such subtle ways. So for instance, you could have a parent who's crying or looking sad, and the kid comes up and says, "Oh, mommy, are you sad?" And the mommy like, "Oh, no, mommy's not sad. It's okay." Well, what have you just done? Mommy's clearly sad, but what she's just done is told the child, your observations are wrong, your instincts are wrong, and you can't trust your own self, what you're observing. So parents, this probably resonates for a lot of you. Parents do this all the time. Don't do that. Okay, don't do it. Yes, mommy's sad, and mommy's going to take care of herself. Kids need to know that everything's okay. But definitely watch that you don't corrupt your child's instincts, because then when you do have, you know, mommy, I don't feel good around Uncle, you know, XYZ, he makes me feel yucky. What are you talking about? He's fine. He loves you. He's a great person. He's a great guy. Now look what you've just done. You've completely, now you have a child that, number one, who knows what this uncle is doing. And as this child grows up, they're not going to trust themselves. They're not going to trust their instincts. So that's one huge thing that I like to get out there. The other thing, of course, like you're saying, create a safe place for your child to talk. And that also means shut up. Okay, kids do not have the ability to talk well and talk quickly and formulate their thoughts quickly. So when you have a child that, you know, when you say something even as innocuous as, how was your day at school today? And the child doesn't respond immediately, what does the parent do? They keep talking, well, come on, talk to me, tell me. Well, what did you do? Did you talk to him? And they don't shut up. And the kid is like, at this point, they're just out of it. Leave your child room and space to gather their thoughts, to trust that you're going to be quiet and really listen to them. And then they will eventually speak. And then you can encourage them and you just do some reflecting. Oh, so tell me more about that. Okay, so I hear you saying that, you know, that wasn't so good today with, you know, out in the playground. Tell me more. So you're making it safe. And then those issues around sexuality, anything sexual will come up as well. And just pay attention to, is it a fact question or an opinion question? What's your child really asking you? And give them answers appropriate to their age, but you can keep them short. But answer the question. Parents are like, get all freaked out, like, oh my God, I gotta have to talk and I don't know what to. Just answer the question in as simple terms as possible, because, you know, especially younger children, they're going to lose interest. You know, Mom, where do babies come from? Just keep it short and sweet. Okay. So, yeah, somebody mentioned gaslighting. Yeah, we gaslight our kids. So, yeah, it's ongoing from birth on. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clark, and everyone that weighed in. That was really, it's true. Unfortunately, we talk a lot and we don't leave the space needed. And sometimes a lot of the magic happens in that space. And jumping off that question, more of an adult version of that, because kids, adults, it's pretty much all the same. But the question is, how would you manage sexual boundaries in friendship? And along those same lines, is intimacy just in relationship with others? And what would be the difference between sex and intimacy? So it's kind of, the question more is relationship-wise, how would that be defined where you keep the sexual boundaries and it stays as a friendship? And if anyone wants to jump in and give their 2 cents. If that question was clear, I apologize if it was a little confusing.
Again, it's that energy. I think I put everything in terms of energy. The energy we put out is what we get back. And I have a handout that anyone wants, I'll put it in the chat. It's at, I'll have to find it. It's on addictamerica.net. And it's called Intimacy by the Numbers. And you know, we get together, have an equal fear of intimacy. So pretty much what we're putting out is what we get back. When you're in a good place yourself, then that's what you're going to attract in your life. Now, of course, a lot of us aren't in a good place, or it takes us forever, a lot of therapy and all we get to in recovery to get to a good place in our lives. But if you're with a friend and you have some interest in that friend that's sexual, you're building a friendship and then it's feeling sexual. It's going to be sexual for the other person if you're both, you know, and if you have that equal, you know, you're both good with yourselves. The other, so then it's, if you're not, you can ask, you know, what's going on for me? What else is going on in my life? How much in addiction am I? How much am I objectifying? What's my motivation in looking at my friend sexually? What do I want? What do I need from this person? how much am I reaching for this person as a drug that's going to make me feel better? I'm reaching for something external to fix something internal. That's drug-seeking behavior. So we do it with people. So am I looking for this person to fix me? Or is there really a vibe here? Is there really something going on that's connecting?
I don't know that I have much to add to what Dr. Clark said about that part of the question, but could you repeat, Shana, the part about intimacy and what those concerns were? Because I'd like to comment on that part, but I want to be sure I had the question correct.
Absolutely. The question was, is intimacy just in relationship with others? And what's the difference between sex and intimacy?
Ah, okay. All right. Yes. So I do have some thoughts about that. You know, I had mentioned when I was introducing myself how I was introduced to the work of Patrick Carnes a long time ago and how impressed I was with that. But I also mentioned that, you know, as the years have gone by, I've really moved away from that model of treatment. And, you know, my grounding is in the existential psychotherapy movement. And in existential psychotherapy, there are a few different issues that become paramount in terms of how people live their lives and live their lives in relation to others. And one of those issues is the issue of isolation. And you know, I think it's pretty obvious when we talk about being isolated from others. And if we're isolated from others and we can't connect to others, we're going to have little to no intimacy with others. But the part that often gets overlooked that I think is really central to this discussion is that there is also an isolation from the self. That if people don't establish an intimate connection with themselves, their sexual behavior often will go awry and be problematic. So for example, one of the things that certainly I see a lot in my practice, and I'm sure everybody in the addiction world sees, are those you know, those parentified children, you know, who grow up feeling like they have to take care emotionally of their parents, who may have emotional difficulties, substance abuse difficulties, you know, et cetera. And they become so tuned in to trying to see, you know, is mommy or daddy getting upset? I need to do something about that. I need to fix that. That they become so tuned into the needs of other people that they completely disconnect from their own needs. As a matter of fact, they often become unaware that they even have any needs. And in sexuality, one of the things we often see with people who have difficulty with intimacy with the self is, again, I'm sure many of you have seen these cases where it's not so much a sexual addiction case, but maybe more a sexual avoidance case or a sexual dysfunction case, where you have, you know, let's just say a man, for example, who is in a relationship with somebody, a long-term relationship, and they have no sex. And it looks like a sexless marriage, but in truth, that man is probably having a lot of sex. He's just having it by himself. Because when people are isolated from themselves, when they are not intimate with themselves, and they can't be intimate with other people, being with other people makes them too anxious. In other words, they're so tuned into how their partner is feeling that they lose a sense of their own arousal and their own pleasure. And the only time they are comfortable enough to allow themselves to experience that is when they are by themselves and they don't need to attend to someone else. So to me, you know, this idea about intimacy and how that factors in is, it begins with an intimacy and a connection to the self. You need to be in touch with your own self before you're going to be able to connect well in a good way with others. I think that was the question. Oh, and are sex and intimacy the same, did you say? Or was that part of the question? Are they
How
the
do
same?
they, yeah, more or less, are they the same or how are they different? Probably a better question.
Yeah, I mean, I see them as different. I think you can have intimacy without sex. You can certainly have sex without intimacy. But I think that in those people who find their sexual lives the most satisfying, they probably coexist.
Just going to add one thing to echo what you just said. I think it's extremely important, the issue of differentiating masturbation or sexual satisfaction on your own versus sexual satisfaction with another. I always tell my patients, no one knows your body as well as you know your body. So if you're going to be with someone else, you probably realize that you're giving up some of the physical aspect of sex in order to get something else that comes in the form of intimacy or connection. Or intimacy comes in different ways. It's not necessarily romantic intimacy, but if you're using sex to do this, to get the same pleasure that you get out of masturbation, then it should make you question whether you should be having sex. If you're using sex as a way to connect sexually with yourself without connecting sexually to another, this gets people in trouble. And I think this creates a level of jadedness that we see often with people who are using sex to cope.
I agree with both the doctors just said, and I just want to add that it's very important to have intimacy with yourself, because without that, you're not going to be able to be intimate with others, because intimacy exists because of trust. So if you don't start trusting your own self, your own body, being in tune with your body, being in tune with, your needs and your own values, you're not going to be able to be trustworthy enough to be able to give that to others. So it does begin with yourself, and I really want to just echo what the doctors both said.
I just want to add that intimacy and sex are different. Sex is an expression of intimacy. And when we're trying to have sex in order to be intimate, to feel intimate, because we want that connection, it's going to be a dead end. And so with my clients, I say, let's look at all the other ways that you can build intimacy and feel that intimacy, and then sex becomes one way to express it out of many. So sex is an expression of intimacy, and then it's not so important what you're doing sexually, or if you're having any kind of sexual problems, erectile dysfunction or something, because it's just about what are we doing in order to connect. So turn that around.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that. I'm actually going to pass it on now to Loren. She's going to introduce Ariella, Ken Seeley, and she'll say a word about Sage, who is our sponsor for the credits. So Loren, it's all yours, and then we'll take it'll be like a 5-10 minutes, and then we'll jump back in. So if all the panelists want to take a look at the questions, feel free to jump in on anything that stands out on you.
Hi, everybody. Loren Hauck again. I'm going to do a brief introduction. Ariella, and I hope I get this correct. Ariella Yudkowski is Chrysalis Way's Director of Operations, and she's going to come on now and talk more specifically about Chrysalis Way. When to refer, when is a good time to refer for a higher level of care, IOP, and how this can benefit your clients. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to you, Ariella.
Hi, everybody. It's such an honor to be here tonight. Firstly, thank you to all the panelists for taking the time and being here with us. And thank you to Loren and Shana for getting this off the ground. And thank you to each one of you who are spending the time watching this webinar and learning and growing and becoming who we all want and deserve to become. So I'm Ariella Yudkowski, Director of Operations of Hope Street. Part of Hope Street, we have Chrysalis Way, which we are very proud of. And this brings me to mentioning two people that are not with us tonight here. Mendy Barron, the CEO and founder of Hope Street Chrysalis Way. He also owns Eden Treatment Center, Ignite Treatment Center, Elemental. Those are all treatment centers, one for women with eating disorders, one for teenagers, one is an online platform, and of course, the new baby on the street, Hope Street, which I am proud to be a part of. And of course, my dear colleague, Faith Nice, who is the woman behind Chrysalis Way. She, alongside Shana, have put together a track that I think it's the first for sure in the States. Can I say the world? I don't know, maybe I can't say that on record, but this is something that really touches me on a personal and a professional level. Sex addiction, sexuality, sex, relationships, intimacy is something that, you know, as some of the panelists touched upon, is something that's a piece of all of us. We all need love and relationships, and we all have a body that needs to work for us. And a lot of us have been hurt. A lot of us have our bodies that have been hurt. And it's a pride to be here tonight with everybody who's growing together and getting our bodies back, getting ourselves back, getting our health back. And Hope Street, so part of Hope Street, like I said, is Chrysalis Way, and we accept clients from many states who need a level of care of intensive outpatient programming, which is 9 hours a week of groups, an hour of individual therapy, plus recovery meetings morning and evening with the recovery liaison and recovery coach. We have a top-notch team led by Dr. Carol Clark, who does the supervision for the team, and of course, Faith Nice, who's the clinical coordinator of Chrysalis Way. And we accept insurance, we have self-pay options. We really are here for those who need us. You know, as Shana mentioned before, if we don't have hope, we can't go on, and especially today, what's going on in the world. Everybody, and I'm going to say everybody, and this I will make an assumption, even as a clinician, I'll make an assumption, everybody after the past 6 months has at some point felt some sort of hopelessness or some sort of despair or some sort of discomfort or pain. And we at Hope Street are here for you. We also have various mental health tracks for people from teenage, young adults, all genders. We accept, we're very trauma focused, very integrative, all sorts of holistic modalities and body movement modalities, experiential, integrative, just there, you know, as human beings, I was trained that we don't just heal through talking, we heal through the body, mind, spirit, and soul. And as human beings, we're complex. We have histories, we have past, we have families, we have ourselves, we have futures, and we have our present. And there's so much to us that we need to just access and tap into and grow ourselves and transform and become who we deserve to become. So that's Hope Street. Definitely reach out to us. Check out our website, hopestreetheals.com. Email us, info@hopestreetheals.com. You can call us, 732-785-4673. That's 732-785-HOPE. And we're here for you. Nobody should ever go through life feeling that no one's there for them. If we can be there for you, we are here for you. So thanks again, Loren, for hosting, and for everybody for being here tonight. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And Ariella, can you go ahead and put the contact information for Chrysalis Way also in the chat? Also, I think somebody had asked for that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah, so thank you, Ariella. And again, tonight you will receive 2 CEs for tonight's event. Again, we'll send you the evaluation link in the morning, which will automate you to a CE certificate. I'll go ahead and attach the CE certificate just in case. I just want to say shout out to our sponsors, including Sage Recovery Villa in the Austin, Texas area. It's a very unique luxury, full wellness, holistic rehab, more specifically for working professionals. We also have a new specialized licensed healthcare professionals program. And just incredible 15 bed small rehab, again located in the Austin, Texas area. So that's Sage Recovery Villa, again that's providing those 2 CEs. And I'm very, very excited to welcome Ken Seeley from the Palm Springs, California area. Ken has multiple programs out in Palm Springs, a full continuum of care, including very trauma-focused Ken Seeley Rehab, and then their new mental health primary residential treatment center in Palm Springs, also called Mental Wellness by Palm Springs, and excited to announce that not only do they work with primary mental health, but they also do specialize in treating OCD. OCD has been a part of my journey now for over 20 years, living with OCD currently today, still also being in recovery from sex and love addiction. And I found myself using more and more of my recovery tools from sex and love addiction to also help me to live and to cope with OCD. Furthermore, Ken's going to talk more about it, but they, again, they both programs focus on trauma and comprehensively treat mental health and OCD and addictions. And they also work with TMS. They also include TMS specifically for OCD in their program as well. And that just became FDA approved August 11th for that new TMS to treat OCD. So very excited about that. Without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and bring Ken on. I think he just has to unmute. There you are. Hey Ken, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear us?
I can hear y'all. Hey Eric, what a surprise. There's Eric McLaughlin. All right, go ahead and talk about your new programs and all that good stuff, and we'll finish by talking about the CCMI trainings.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you everyone for being here. What a great honor to be a part of this and see all of you. You know, as Loren said, you know, I love this topic. You know, I had 10 years clean and off of crystal meth and alcohol, and I was in my full-blown sex and love addiction and bought a gun to commit suicide because I didn't want to use drugs or alcohol, but I didn't want to go through the pain anymore. And so I really understand the intensity of love and sex and addictions. And then I went into Pine Grove to the professional enhancement program with 23 years clean. And they would let us go into the sex programs meeting once a week. And, you know, the people that are in that recovery, that are in early recovery, I've never seen how challenging it is with the pain because they don't have the drugs and alcohol to numb the pain that they cause their families. So working in this field and working like we do in our treatment facility, I have a client right now that's with sex addiction, and his fiance is devastated that he's in PHP because, you know, she's afraid he's going to go out and cheat on her. So I really understand this disease. I really get it. I, you know, personally having it, personally go through recovery, but then now treating it. So I'm really grateful that you guys are all here. You want to talk a little bit more about how we treat it and help people?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we have a number of facilities specifically designed to meet different needs. You know, what we found is, you know, we started with a small outpatient and have grown that into a full substance abuse co-occurring disorder facility. But because we're small, we really have a lot of flexibility and provide some support for people to be able to help if there's something that's a little bit outside of the box. But what we did realize is that we were seeing a lot more of the significant and primary mental health. And, you know, the Coachella Valley, which is where Palm Springs was, has, you know, a few 24-hour stabilization units, but not any place for primary mental health. So we were able to open an inpatient primary mental health, you know, you can take insurance there, to be able to meet the ever-growing needs that we have. And it's so nice to be on a panel with people who are doing such great work in these areas, you know, and really kind of, you know, to hear eating disorder specific programs, sex programs, OCD programs, and, you know, addressing those issues has been really kind of amazing to see. And, you know, we just hope to keep broadening services for people who have chronic mental illness and need help and support that's not institutional. And then should we talk about the trainings, Loren? Is that?
Yeah, and I talked about the trainings. Oh, I am unmuted. I talked about the trainings at the beginning of the symposium. And again, I want to reiterate that all attendees with us tonight will receive a $50 discount to, one of the next CCMI trainings that Ken and Eric, Intervention 911, have coming up. The next one is coming up soon, starting this Friday to Sunday. Yep, and then we have one October, one November. These trainings are just an incredible way for therapists, any behavioral health professionals to log in for the education, log in for the 20 CEs, the ethics credit, the networking. Our trainings have been bringing in online around between 75 and 125 attendees. So it just really creates a community where we all can refer to each other. We all trust each other. We went through these trainings together. And again, something super unique about Ken and Eric's CCMI trainings is they don't just focus on intervention techniques for substance use disorder and dual diagnosis, but also for primary mental health, and process addiction, sex and love addiction, eating disorders. Their company, Intervention 911, does interventions on all of those things, not just substance use disorder. That's something to remember. We're all complex. So, like Ken was saying, you can be in recovery for so many years. I'm in recovery from sex and love addiction myself for over 4 years now. But, I still live with severe OCD, on a daily basis now for over 20 years. And to work with, companies, like, Kinseely Rehab, Kinseely Communities, Chrysalis Way, Sage Recovery Villa, that they're smaller, privately owned, that are really doing individualized treatment. And bringing new things to the forefront, like TMS for OCD, and treating OCD and mental health issues in a comprehensive way, treating the whole person is something that I just haven't seen before. And I've been in the field for 16 years. So, it's very, very passionate about being able to do these online symposiums and reaching this amount of people. So again, $50 discount for any one of the next upcoming CCMI trainings. You can do all 5 of the trainings and become a certified case manager and interventionist through Ken and Eric, Intervention 911. It's an incredible way for a therapist to expand on their services. So hope you can join us. You can go to, we'll send out the links tomorrow morning also, but you can go to intervention911.com /certification-process. And I'll put that in the chat. That's a way to read more details about the CCMI trainings. And then I'll also put that intervention911.com /events and just go to mod 4. And it'll take you into the event starting on Friday. You can start the trainings at any time. You don't have to go in order. If you skip one, you can just get back in the next month or so. So I hope to see you all there. And yeah, we look forward to it. With that being said, let's see what else. Shana, you coming in? Are you still there? Shana?
Yep. I'm
okay.
Here.
Yay. Time that good.
Thank you, Loren. Thank you, Ken and Eric.
Yeah,
so lovely to see both of you, and Ariella. Always a pleasure to have so many people that will stand up and say a couple of words on this topic. I'll jump back in. I have a question that's actually something that's come up a lot personally that I hear of, and I was wondering if I could just bring it to all of you. And that is based on the different cultures. So my question is, how do you approach a topic of sexuality when you're dealing with different cultures? And what my main reason for asking that is, how do we deal with when people take it as a moral issue, whereas there's a difference between sex addiction and people doing sexual things that don't agree with them, that don't align with their morals. So how do you separate morality from sex and sexuality and those things? And I hear it's come up a lot, and I'd love to hear your takes on it.
I can go first. What's interesting about this question is it often has to do with the preconceived ideas of the clinician and the perception that our our questions or our discussion is going to offend, or when most of the time it doesn't. One good approach, and it all has to do with the level of rapport that you're building with your patients. One thing that one approach that's worked for me that I'm guessing would work for a lot of people attending this webinar is, I tell my patients, like, listen, I do specialize in sex, so I tend to talk about sex very comfortably. I'm going to ask some questions. If you feel uncomfortable or if you feel like it's something that's too intimate that you don't want to discuss, feel free to give me some pushback. And I think patients respond well to this. Yeah, for me, it's second nature. I talk about sex in the same way that people talk about chocolate. It helps people put things in perspective, and basically you're empowering the patients to say, yeah, it's something that I don't want to talk about, or a lot of patients would feel comfortable using this approach today. As you're normalizing it, as you're reducing your own anxiety about the topic, it's going to make the patient feel more comfortable talking about the sensitive issue. And that, I found that to be true across cultures, like across people from different religions and along the religion spectrum.
So, I'll jump in a little bit too. So I would certainly agree with Dr. Aoun for sure. I'm fortunate in that I practice in an ethnically diverse area. So I've had exposure to people from many different cultures who have come to me with some sexual difficulties or sexual problems. And so the question about how do you separate for different cultures, I guess it was Shana, the morality versus what was the other piece of it? The morality versus the addiction.
The addiction or how you view sexuality.
Right. So and I know this may sound a bit odd, but I rarely concern myself with those questions, only because in the way I practice, diagnosis is irrelevant. This whole debate about sex addiction, does it exist? Does it not exist? Should it be in the DSM? Should it not be in the DSM? For someone who practices from an existential perspective, diagnosis is irrelevant in terms of treatment because, we see it as very limiting and in some ways, dehumanizing really. And so I look at it as I was taught by my mentor. Some of you are probably familiar with the work of Irvin Yalom, who I have learned from extensively. It's a new therapy for every patient, no matter what they're coming in with. That everybody's therapy needs to be tailored to that person. And so what I see in front of me is not somebody who's a sex addict per se, but I see somebody who is struggling with their sexuality. So whether it's because their morals have a hard time, letting them wrap their heads around what their partners may want, or what they want that they have difficulty accepting, or the way they are engaging in the behavior, I don't think that it has to be labeled or diagnosed as anything in particular. So I hope that addresses the issue and how I get around sort of. I want to know from everybody, what are you like? What do you think? How does this feel to you? What does this mean to you? As I said, I work in an ethnically diverse area. I happen to see a lot of East Indian patients, and they're all different, so, knowing a little bit about their culture is helpful, but I don't think it's necessary because I want to learn from them how they personally view sex and their sexuality.
I agree with Dr. Waters. He and I have a lot in common.
Yes, we do.
But I'm a student of Yalom because I studied Yalom extensively as well. And really it's about working with the individual that's in front of you and looking at what their level of tolerance is, their lifestyle, their values, and how they could respect the values and lifestyle of others. So it's really about working with that individual person and having them embrace themselves and their sexuality, because we all have different likes, different dislikes and different views. So we're not going to be the same. And I think working with a person to help them understand that goes a long way. So I agree.
When we talk about morality, you know, we all need to figure out what that means for us. I don't really, you know, it's what is connecting. I find it's more useful to think about what is connecting and what is disconnecting. Connection is about really feeling, having empathy, the capacity for empathy for other people. I can't hurt someone because it would hurt me. You know, if I go up and if I do something harmful to someone, it harms me. I feel that. I can't do it. So that because I'm connected, people who are disconnected, either through addiction or if they're unfortunately have, you know, personality disorder or something, you know, they're not capable of feeling other people's pain. And so that kind of gets to morality is, you know, what harms other people? Can I, you know, what do I do that harms other people, or do I not harm other people? And so when it comes to sexuality, again, it's an expression of connection, of intimacy, of just being present, mindful that you're with another person. So I look at everything through that lens. When people come to see me from different cultures, and I have to say, I have to be very mindful about people who seem to come from my culture. I'm from the Northeast. I live in Florida now, but I'm originally from New Jersey. And, you know, I'm 67 years old. So people who grew up in the 60s and 70s from the Northeast, you know, but yet we're so different. So I have to be most careful when I'm around people that I think they're from my culture, because quite often I'll really step in it. So with people from other cultures, other races, whatever, you know, then it's all about, you know, what do you want? Why are you here? Tell me about you, what's going to work for you as we're moving towards your goals. And if I'm working with a couple or any, you know, people that want to be more connected and intimate, then we set that ground rule. It's like, you're here to be more connected. Is that true? And sometimes they say no. Sometimes they're really struggling in relationship. Usually people say, yes, we want to be more connected and intimate. Then from this moment onwards, everything you do, every decision you make, you say, is this connecting us or is this disconnecting us? And then we just work around whatever parameters are in their particular cultures, races, beliefs, systems. But it's really all about let's connect instead of disconnect. And that's how I approach it.
Thank you, everyone, for that. And Dr. Water, I have a question that I know you've definitely, this is something that you've dealt with a lot, and I know you wrote something about it. So I'm curious if you could explain a little bit about it, and I'd love for anyone else to jump in. And this is a question that comes up a lot. The question is, how do you define sexual dysfunction? Because there's such a fine line, and I'd love to hear your take on that and what you have to say about it.
So, yeah, so you may be disappointed in the answer because I don't have a great definition for that. You know, to me, sexual dysfunction would be sexual behavior that kind of goes awry. You know, in other words, something isn't working the way that people want it to. Usually when we talk about sexual dysfunction, we're talking about physical problems like erection problems, arousal problems, orgasm problems. But I think the best way that I can answer that would be to respond to one of the questions that came up here. So if you don't mind, can I sort of do it that way? Okay, so there's a question that came up on the board, says someone who had a client who expressed that she was no longer interested in sex with her husband, but had been in the past. Because she was seeing me for a traumatic accident at work, I thought maybe this was the reason, but she told me that she was already experiencing this years prior. She did have some history of sexual abuse from previous boyfriend, however, still had a sexual appetite with her husband after this. Can this kind of thing arise later in the relationship? She was still in love with her husband and denied any other attraction to other people. How is the best way to address this? So this question actually, I think, sort of captures the essence of how I see sexual dysfunction and the treatment of sexual dysfunction. You know, like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and my approach has evolved over the years. And the way that we have typically looked at sexual dysfunction or a case like this in sex therapy has been that there must be some kind of performance anxiety, you know, going on. That's usually what is said to be the cause of most sexual dysfunction. I don't believe that. Actually, I think that performance anxiety is a peripheral structure. Perhaps maybe it helps in the maintenance of a problem. But what I typically see in my practice are people who have a history of a good sexual relationship with the partner that they are now having difficulty with. And to me, what happened that made things change? The idea that performance anxiety would creep in all of a sudden to someone that you had a good sexual history with for a long time makes very little sense to me. I think that a lot of sexual dysfunction that we're seeing, especially in cases like this one that was just written about, and what I've written about a lot is the way that non-sexual trauma results in sexual dysfunction. So in other words, usually when we think about trauma and sexual function, we think about sexual abuse, you know, sexual trauma. But what I see in my practice is a lot of people who had early childhood trauma. It later can get triggered by something in their relationship. And in a very sort of self-protective way, they shut down as a way of pulling back. Whether it's a fear of intimacy, a fear of rejection, a fear of being smothered, whatever it may be, that something gets triggered. That, and for this woman, whether it had to do with her accident or not, and that was sort of the final trigger, or whatever was happening before, why she is able to, for years, have good sex with a partner and no longer can, yet still, you know, it is not unhappy in the relationship. It's not about the dynamic between, you know, or how she feels about her partner. There's probably some underlying trauma, childhood trauma, that got triggered. Now, to bring this more into the sexual addiction realm, what I have also, and I think this is the article probably that you were talking about that I had showed you, Shana, is that I published a few articles on this in the last several years. The idea that a lot of sexual addictive behavior is actually triggered by a confrontation with mortality. I have collected now several dozen cases of people whose sexual behavior spiraled uncharacteristically out of control after a confrontation with mortality. And if anybody's interested, obviously I don't have the time. I don't want to monopolize the time to go into a big big discussion of that today, or big explanation of that, but I would be happy to send one of these articles to anybody who was interested. So let me just give you just a quick example of how this sometimes happens in ways that are really hard to predict if you're not already looking for the association. So a lot of the men that I have seen in this grouping of several dozen cases had fathers who died young. And for a lot of men with fathers who die young, they live with this overarching sense that they will not live past that point. And as they approach the age that their father died, they experience such a strong death terror that they look to mollify those feelings of terror through sex, which existentially is considered the life force, right? Sex creates life. Death removes life. And so it's this constant spiraling of out of control behavior to counter the fear of death that actually has created this addictive, what we would call an addictive pattern in so many of these men who never behaved that way before. Obviously, this doesn't talk about everybody who complains of sexual addiction. It's a subgroup of people that I've seen, but it's so to me, sexual dysfunction in whatever form it takes, is the result of a triggering of early childhood trauma that has not been satisfactorily addressed. It took the long way around that, but you know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waters. And would anyone else like to join in? I know this topic is a hot topic, and I know Dr. Clark, you probably have a lot of experience with this. And I feel like actually the truth is this is the basis of everything, is not what's going on, but what's underneath what's going on. So whoever else would like to take the floor, please jump in. There's so much to talk about over here.
Yeah, I mean, that trauma basis of addiction, and again, I don't look at, you know, sex addiction is about addiction, not about sex. You know, certain sexual behaviors become the drug of choice, but addiction is about those, you know, the early childhood messages that we take in from even small t traumas, you know, that we take in, we're not good enough, we're worthless, we're, you know, not important, we're failures. And then as we grow up, that becomes the filter through which we see everything and experience the world. And then we have to develop that fear of intimacy because we can't get close to people. We have to control how close we get to people. And that creates an existential pain, an internal pain that then we discover, oh, there's porn, there's alcohol, there's a drug, there's something that relieves that pain. And the unconscious mind, the limbic system where the addiction is, makes that connection that, when I do this, I have this relief from a pain that was so part of me, I didn't even know it was there until it stopped. And then when the drug wears off, then the pain comes back. So of course, the first thing we're going to do is go for that drug again. And then that leads down the road to addiction. And, you know, so using sex in various ways to control how close we get to other people. I was saying something about that in the chat to somebody. And coming up with all kinds of ways to, you know, addiction is a barrier to intimacy. It's that simple. And so we're going to create all kinds of ways to not be close, to control how close we get to other people. So I think, did I go off track with that? There you go.
Can I just add, I noticed that a few people are asking for the copies of the article that I referenced, so I'm very, very happy to send them. So Shana, am I going to be able to give my email address at the end somehow? Because it would be easy if you just email me, so I have your email address and I'll send it to you, whoever wants it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Water, if you don't mind just putting it on the chat now, that would be great. You can just send it to all attendees.
Great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Okay.
Dr. Ayom, do you want to jump in a little bit on this topic, and then Robert as well?
Robert, do you want to go first? Sorry, I jumped. I threw it. I guess I agree with everything that's been, with most things that have been said. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Are we talking about the sexual dysfunction on topic, or something around? Which question are you talking about?
I'd love to hear your take on that. It's not what's going on now, it's what's underneath that. I think this kind of went to the trauma. And something else that I've noticed came up a lot in the chat is, how does this go off of rape, or how people were abused as children, and now they're left here trying to pick up the pieces, and does that cause them to turn to sex addiction specifically? And I know that there's so many different ways to see that, but I see a lot of questions about rape and abuse, and what are your thoughts on if that caused this?
Well, my first, it doesn't cause it, because everyone's going to respond to, it differently. Someone that's been raped may respond to going the other way, of sexual anorexia, or not having sexual self-hatred, or they go to the other extreme of, compulsivity, addictive behaviors, like Dr. Waters was talking about. So it's not about what maybe the cause of the underlying reason of how they feel about it what it is right now and how they're going to address it to get through some of that pain and anger.
Thank you, Robert. Another question that I'm noticing has been coming up. Here, I'm actually going to pull it up because it was phrased really well about what do you do when, how do you deal with this when you're married and you're attracted to your spouse, but you seem to have this addiction that's pulling you to some other person, and you do love your spouse and you do want to stay with them, but you feel this like pull that you can't stay away. And bouncing off of that topic, once I'm saying it, is also going from sex addiction and then going to the other end of the spectrum, where being asexual or sexual anorexia. How do you balance that out? I don't know if those two questions go together, but in my mind it did. So feel free to break them down.
So I said, I responded to that on the chat a bit. And I'll just add that, you know, addiction and recovery are it's about having that moment of clarity when you can make a decision, when you can move your prefrontal cortex opens up and allows you to make a decision. You can say, I want to live in recovery. And you start making decisions about recovery. And that means whatever your drug of choice, whether it's a person or alcohol or, you know, cocaine or something, it's about saying, I choose to live in recovery. I'm going to do things that are recovery oriented. And, you know, other things are not an option. And, you know, when I quit smoking for the 5th time, and finally I put all the pieces together, then having a cigarette was not an option. It became not an option. And it's really about, I think, about making that decision and then living in a way that is in harmony with that. So, you know, of course, yeah, you get all those feel-good chemicals going on in your addict brain that want you to have sex with that other person, and you interpret that as being in love. But what it is it's something that's going to pass. It's something that is not in harmony with living in recovery. It's something that's a barrier to intimacy with your chosen partner, who in this case, you know, someone is saying their husband. And we need to make a conscious decision about that. You know, so often when we get married, it's kind of assumed that it's going to be a monogamous marriage, unless, you know, the couple has already talked about it. But generally it's an assumption, an expectation, but there's never an actual part of the vows, which I am not going to cheat on you. I am not going to go outside this relationship. It's just expected and assumed. It's not actually stated. When we form intentions and say, I am going to do this, I am not going to do this, then we're far more likely to be able to live with them. But yeah, addiction recovery is hard. I am so in awe of anybody in recovery, because it's the hardest work you'll ever do, but you evolve. You evolve. So God bless all of you who are in recovery. I'm so in awe of you. You're amazing.
Yeah, I think, you know, Dr. Clark answered that question very well. I would echo most all of her sentiments on that. But the one thing I would like to point out, and again, I may be splitting hairs, but those who identify as asexual would actually take great offense at having that equated with sexual anorexia. Those who identify as asexual, it's their choice. They see that as a choice to not express themselves sexually, whereas, as I understand sexual anorexia, you know, that's more the result of that would be more like non-sexual as opposed to asexual, because of the fear or trauma, perhaps, that you know, that they had experienced in their past, and so they become more sexually avoidant, not so much out of feeling like it's a healthy choice, for lack of a better word, but because, you know, the sexual anorexics, I think, have been more traumatized. So I think it's an important distinction.
No, it is. Those two different things, sexual anorexia and sexual. So I agree with you on that. And one of the other things I want to add, I agree with what Dr. Clark said as well, is about communication. And I think we have not mentioned that much tonight about how important that is in relationships, especially with couples, communicating. The husband that says, I still love my wife, but I want to go outside the marriage. But is he communicating and talking about what his, wishes are and his likes are and his fantasies are? Is he really speaking about that with his own partner? So communication is a very important aspect of relationships with couples as they continue to have a sexual relationship. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Dr. Waters?
Okay, sorry, I lost my screen for a second. Yes, I would agree.
I'm going to echo what's just been said. Communications are so important because very often within couples, whether it's a married couple or not a married couple, people make assumptions about what the other person wants or needs without talking to them. And people assume that what the other person needs or is looking for is consistent with what's technically on this quote unquote culturally appropriate. Whereas sexuality, I mean, we started this conversation with it's extremely difficult to talk about sex. So the assumptions are often based on inappropriate, inaccurate facts. So talking about these things and normalizing them, I often encourage people to, regardless of what they decide to do within their couple, like actually express interest in other people. Like I tell people, if you're walking on the street and you see someone that you're attracted to, normalize saying, "Oh, this is an attractive person." I would, like, if I wasn't in a monogamous relationship, this is the kind of person that I'd love to have sex with. And people are shocked when they hear that, but it's all about normalizing these conversations and pushing to the consciousness issues that are often unconscious or masked by shame or guilt. It can give people stuff to laugh about because when we're not ashamed of sex, we can make jokes about it and enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, that was really well said. And I know there's so much on these topics. I'm going to end off with one last question that I see has come up a lot, and I'm not sure the best way to answer this, but I'd love for you all to give it a try. The secrets, the shame, the guilt that fuel the addiction. How do you approach this? How do you help someone that's struggling with this? What's the best way to take that away? And I guess what I've once heard, and it stuck with me, is that shame is for who we are and guilt is for what we've done. And there's never a reason for anyone to ever have shame because who we are, we're all beautiful human beings. And the guilt for what we've done, there's always a way to get over that. So I'd love to hear your take on it, and we'll end off with this question. And then after that, we'll just give everyone's contact information and we'll call it a night.
I can go first. I mean, I guess the most important thing to remind our patients is that addictions and addictive behaviors live in shame and guilt. The more people are afraid of talking about their behaviors, the more likely they are to further engage in these behaviors in a way that becomes self-destructive and self-sabotaging. I mean, since we're using addictions to drugs and alcohol, I always use the comparison of when AA and NA and other community mutual support groups are not necessarily treatment, but they offer people with addictive disorders a community in which they're sitting with others who have gone through what they've gone through, who can discuss the difficulties they're having with their recovery. It doesn't mean that everyone who's trying to stop, to limit their sexual behavior or change their sexual behavior should attend a group like this, but no one should feel like they're dealing with this on their own. No one should feel like no one can understand what it means like for to be addicted to sex, to be unable to control your sexual behavior, and being able to share these things with people who've gone through similar experience will help normalize these behaviors. So shame is a cultural construct that sustains and maintains those unhealthy behaviors. And we should remind people that commitment to recovery is very strongly correlated with being open and finding a group of people that you trust, that you can talk to about what you're going through.
I would certainly, agree with what Dr. Allen is saying. Absolutely. What I would also add, I guess, is, as someone who does mostly individual or couples therapy, as is my training in existential psychotherapy with Ariella, believe that the therapeutic relationship itself can be probably the most extraordinary healing tool that the therapists have. And so being able to establish an open, accepting, transparent, trusting, mutually engaged therapeutic relationship with someone is a wonderful way to help them overcome their sense of shame and guilt. Because if they're working with you in therapy and they see that you are accepting of them, you can help them deal with whatever trauma may have created that sense of shame and guilt, and they will be able to take what they get from the therapeutic relationship and its healing potential out into their other relationships beyond the therapy room.
Dr. Warder, do you want to explain a little bit deeper into why someone would choose to be asexual and what would be the background behind that? I see a little bit of confusion about that. And I'd love for you, if you, I see that they mentioned your name. I guess you brought that up, but if anyone would like to jump in, I know that's a hot topic. So if you have a few minutes, that would be great.
Yeah, I can say a couple of things about it. One is I think that asexuality is not necessarily very well understood. It's an area that has only recently, begun to be really examined and looked at. I think the position of most people who identify as asexual would say it's not a choice at all, just like being heterosexual or homosexual or bisexual are not choices, but they're sexual orientations that come to them either, whether you want to say naturally or by some mechanism that we just don't understand. We really have such a poor understanding at this point about what create sexual interests, right? We really have no idea why people are interested in the things that they become interested in. There are lots of theories and ideas that have been bantered around, but none that has really any scientific vigor or data behind it. So to answer the first part, I don't think one chooses to be asexual. I think that's how they experience their sexuality or lack thereof. So that's why I changed that a little bit, or distinguish that rather from sexual anorexia or being non-sexual, because these are people who probably do feel sexual, but for reasons, whether they're trauma or choice, don't act on that or avoid that. Whereas asexuals will just say, this is how I am. I didn't choose it, just how I am. So I don't know if anybody else has thoughts about it, but that's how I understand it. I can, for those who want to learn more about it, out there, I can give you the names of some of my colleagues that I know have been doing a lot of research and trying to study people who identify as asexual to try and understand that orientation better.
I tend to agree with that, and also want to add that a sign of a sexually healthy adult affirms their own sexual orientation and respect the sexual orientation of others. So I really respect that. And just like a sexual expression, when you're able to express yourself sexually, and you have that, you do so without the fear, guilt, and shame that comes with it. So that's most signs. So I support that and agree with it.
So I'll add a couple of things about guilt. What I talked before about guilt and shame. I do want to say that thank goodness, be thankful every day if you're able to experience guilt and shame, because it means you're not a sociopath or a psychopath. You have a capacity in you to grow and evolve and be a better person, more loving person, whatever it is you want to be. You have that in you. So people who don't experience those emotions are not people we really want to be around, and we can pray for them and have compassion. But guilt and shame are part of the human experience. And so, as has been said, you know, fellowship, being around other people, being able to share it. The connection of suffering is so powerful. And that suffering of feeling one's own guilt or shame about something, that's a sharing of suffering in one way that is very connecting. You know, when life is going well, you know, we don't really think about connecting so much. It's when we're suffering, when something happens, that then when we can reach out, when we're able to reach out, then we can heal, we can connect. And another thing is atonement. I was reading somewhere about, soldiers returning from battle and wars, and where they've done horrible things. They feel like they've done horrible things. And it's not so much about making it okay and getting over it. It's about doing something better. So doing something to reach outside yourself and make the world a better place, and just move on instead of focusing on oneself and what we did. Let's do something for others to just make the world a better place. There's that.
Dr. Clark, I love that you brought that up, because there's nothing as powerful as joining together in our hardships. And I know in the AA rooms, or put anything before the A, any rooms of that sort, the 12-step rooms, they say this phrase, how we join together in our weaknesses, not strengths. Because when we're strong, we're good. It's being able to see that someone else is struggling and knowing we're not alone, because that feeling of alone pulls us down. And it almost takes us deep down, and you can't get out that way. So being able to just feel like there's someone else that understands you, that there's nothing like that. That's the beauty of humans, where we're there for each other, and we're able to be vulnerable and open up to each other, and that helps each other. And more than helping each other, it helps us. It helps us heal a little more by being able to share our story. So I love that you brought that up. Thank you. And one last thing that we have not addressed, and I'm curious if we can address it. It's about, let me just make sure I have the right word, because I'm actually not familiar with it at all. It's sexual positivity. And what does that mean? I saw a few questions about it. I had to Google it myself, because I actually never heard of it. But if anyone wants to jump in and just say their thoughts on that, I'd love to hear that.
Okay, I'm not comfortable with silence. Let's move. So I look at sexual positivity as just, it's a response to what we were talking about at the beginning of this panel. The whole discussion tonight is, feeling good about ourselves, about being sexual beings, about being able to share sexuality, being sexual, and not carrying around the shame and guilt because we are sexual creatures, about being just open, honest, living our best authentic selves, and embracing the sexual part of our beings, and being in connection. So that's all positive. That's all I got.
Shannon, I'll say again what you wanted to say, the last part. I missed it.
About sexual positivity.
Sexual positivity. it's about embracing yourself as a sexual being, and like I said earlier, respecting others being sexual beings. And I think one of the things that we have to start looking at is, being sexual or sexuality is something positive. It doesn't have to be negative. And I think we have to, move from the way we grew up and the way things have been presented, from some hang-ups that we may have had, be it religious, be it, not being able to be affirmed or to feel positive about yourself. So, being sexual is just part of life and is a part of the life process.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, I think that explained it, where sexuality is not a negative thing. It's actually positive, and it's who we are, and it's a beautiful thing if we can tune into it in the right ways. And I like what Dr. Waters said in the beginning, how it's just a form of intimacy, and it's how you choose to deal with that. We'll take the last 10 minutes to end off to just say everyone's contact information, and if anyone has any questions that they want to forward along, where can we reach you? So we'll start with Dr. Carol Clark. I'm actually really excited that she is going to be part of Chrysalis Way, which is this new program that we started. Dr. Clark is going to be supervising. So we're really lucky to have her. And Dr. Clark, if you want to say a few words of how people can reach you if they would like to hear a little bit more or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who's already bought my book. That's cool. So I put my my email in there a couple of times, counselor@drcarolclark.com. I have a bunch of websites. There's addictamerica.net, where it talks about the book a bit, drcarolclark.com, it talks about me, and it has a picture of my bug. By the way, I have a bug named after me. Take that. I'm so cool. And I used to work for an entomologist. And and then my schools. So I know we have some clinicians on this call. If anyone is interested in becoming a certified sex therapist or an addictions professional, or we have some other certifications in kink, sex offenders, hypnotherapy, and all of those are, contact me, counselor@drcarolclark.com. And if you want a PhD in clinical sexology, very cool being a sex doctor, I do that too. So that's the International Institute of Clinical Sexology, which is at clinicalsexologyphd.org. But all of that, come through me. I'm fine, totally accessible. You just look Dr. Carol Clark. I'm on YouTube. I'm all over the place. And hey, South Africa person, my web person is in Cape Town, by the way. So small world. You gotta love the internet. You gotta love the internet. This is so cool. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Robert Johnson, will move along to you. We're excited to have Robert Johnson as one of the clinicians in Chrysalis Way as well. Robert, if you want to tell everyone how they could reach you, if they have any other questions, that would be great. Sorry, Robert, you're muted.
There it is. I say thank you. I was very happy to be part of this panel. And if anyone have any questions for me, I do very well one-on-one, and I'm very happy to be one of the therapists, with Crystal Way. I did put my email on for all the panelists and for the attendees, so you can reach me through there. So I'm really happy to be part of such an elite group. I feel so inferior towards some of the people up here, but I'm really happy. And Dr. Clark's school is awesome, so I really encourage anyone that wants more to really do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Dr. Ellie Ayon. Unfortunately, right now you're not part of our team, but one day we will get you and you have a little more time. But if you can just say a little information about how people can reach you, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'd be more than happy to kind of chat online or offline at any point. I'm I'm based in New York, so anyone who's in New York and would like to meet in person, hit me up. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to discuss over email or a Zoom call. The best way to reach me is probably by email or by visiting my website. My website is legaunmd.com, or my email is ellie@legaunmd.com. I'll write it in the chat section so that people can save it.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Water, it would be our pleasure, because I know that you're definitely one busy one. And I know when we first started this whole thing, you were one of the first people that we approached. So yeah, if you can give us your contact information.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, so just let me thank you again for inviting me. I really enjoyed this. I love being part of this great panel. I think everybody had such interesting things to say, and I think you've got a great program going. I think you're going to be very, very successful. But for those who would like to send a question or a comment to me directly, I posted my email on my website in the chat bar there. But it's Dr. Water, DRWATTER @mac.com. My website is www.morris.psych.com. And if you found any of the things that I said tonight interesting, please keep your eyes open for my new book, which will be out sometime within the next year from Routledge Publishing, called The Existential Importance of the Penis, a New Guide to Understanding Male Sexuality. And it's really all about how men communicate through their penises, both in healthy and unhealthy ways. Or I should say, problematic and non-problematic ways.
Look forward to that reading.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I always want to make puppets, penis and vulva puppets, because I think that our genitals speak for the limbic system, for the unconscious brain. The conscious brain says, "Oh, I want this," or "I don't want that," but the limbic system is what's speaking, and our genitals will speak, and
Yes, they do.
in various ways. So
that's the title of chapter 2.
I love it. Wow. Great ones.
The penis speaks. The penis speaks. That's what it's
I love it.
Thank you for that little bit of humor. I just also wanted to mention, we were supposed to have Carolyn Smith join us. Unfortunately, she lives in a rural area and there was a bad storm, so her internet went out. But have no fear, we will absolutely have her on for another webinar, so stay tuned. We will absolutely do that. And again, we will have Faith Nice on as well. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it, but she will absolutely be here another time. I just wanted to let anyone know that if they have any questions about this new program that we are starting, it will be starting in October. And it's called Chrysalis Way, and it's going to be a virtual IOP program. And it's pretty much 9 hours a week. It's all virtual, so you get to stay in your own house and get the help you need with some of the top clinicians around the world, because they don't have to travel. So we've been having a lot of outreach of people that are interested. So I'm really excited that we're able to pull this off. And if anyone has any other questions, you can always email me. And then Loren, I'll jump over to you if you want to say a few words, and then we can end with Ken. Or if you want to, Loren, if you want to cover Ken as well, feel free.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Apologize. My corgi puppy is chewing up my couch right now because I'm not paying attention to her. Anyways, yes, thank you everybody for joining. And our apologies, Carolyn Smith was not able to make it. Carolyn's incredible. She does part of Ken Seeley's CCMI trainings. She talks a lot about attachment theory, sex addiction, love addiction. She's a director of addiction services at Pine Grove in Mississippi. And then she also puts on several different self-discovery type workshops. And as I said in the beginning, I'll come up with a question. If anybody can answer this question, you can win a free workshop to one of Carolyn Smith's intensive workshops, which are absolutely incredible. Okay, so what's the question? Where is Ken Seeley Communities located? You can put it in the chat. First one in the chat gets it right, gets Okay, Mary Lou, oh God, they're coming in fast. Mary Lou, oh my God, I'm gonna kill it, name. Quissel, we know who you are. We're gonna send that up. We're gonna send that to Mary Lou. It's a certificate from Carolyn Smith herself. And if anybody, we're gonna be doing these online symposiums monthly probably. So if anybody has any topics in the realm of sexual and love addiction, please let us know. And again, if you have any questions, referrals, you've got the contact information for Chrysalis Way. And again, thank you to Shana, Robert, Carol, Daniel, Ken, everybody for giving us such a success tonight. And most of the people that logged on are still on, so that's a good sign. All right, guys, well, good night, and we'll send you the evaluation link and CE certificate tomorrow morning, okay? All right, y'all, good night.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Bye-bye.